Admiral Kresh stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the blue marble that was Earth grow larger on his view screen. The massive dreadnought, stretching nearly 10 kilometers from bow to stern, led a fleet of 3,000 warships toward the third planet of the Sol system. Behind him, his tactical officers worked at their stations with calm efficiency, their scaled hands dancing across holographic displays. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving multiple transmission attempts from the planet below. They seem to be trying to establish diplomatic contact." Kresh's mandibles clicked in what his species considered amusement. The Zephyrians had conquered 47 worlds in the past century, and every single one had tried the same pathetic approach. Diplomacy. Negotiation. As if primitive worlds had anything to offer the mighty Galactic Empire. "Ignore them," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never known defeat. "Begin orbital bombardment of their major population centers. We follow standard protocol." The Empire had perfected their conquest strategy over generations. First, they would destroy the largest cities to break the spirit of resistance. Then, they would land ground forces to secure strategic resources. Finally, they would establish mining operations and processing facilities, turning the conquered world into another cog in their vast imperial machine. The surviving natives would either serve as laborers or be relocated to designated areas where they could live out their days in peaceful submission. Earth had caught the Empire's attention not because of any particular threat, but because long-range surveys had detected unusual energy signatures and rare mineral deposits. The third planet orbited a stable yellow star and showed signs of an industrial civilization, but nothing their databases suggested would pose any real challenge. The inhabitants called themselves humans, and preliminary scans indicated they had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. "Sir, their ships are moving to intercept," reported Commander Vex from the tactical station. "Approximately 200 vessels of various classes approaching from multiple vectors." Kresh examined the tactical display with professional interest. The human fleet consisted mostly of smaller vessels, none longer than 2 kilometers. Their largest ships appeared to be crude attempts at capital ship construction, but they lacked the refined design and massive firepower of proper Imperial dreadnoughts. "It would be over quickly. Deploy fighter squadrons," he ordered. "Let them see the futility of resistance before we begin the bombardment." Thousands of Zephyrian strike craft poured from the launch bays of the fleet, their sleek forms cutting through space like silver arrows. Each fighter was equipped with plasma cannons and guided missiles, more than sufficient to deal with primitive spacecraft. The pilots, trained from childhood for space combat, moved with practiced precision as they formed attack formations. The human fleet continued its approach, and Kresh noted they were attempting some kind of formation flying. Quaint, but ultimately meaningless. Their ships moved too slowly, and their weapons appeared to be projectile-based rather than energy weapons. Some of their vessels were actually firing small metal slugs at extreme range, as if such primitive ammunition could threaten Imperial shields. "Admiral," Commander Vex said, his voice carrying a note of confusion. "The human projectiles are not following standard ballistic trajectories. They appear to be adjusting course during flight." Kresh's attention sharpened. Guided projectiles were not unusual, but the tracking systems showed the human ammunition behaving in ways that defied their preliminary assessments. The metal slugs were accelerating and changing direction with impossible precision, as if they possessed advanced targeting systems far beyond what their crude appearance suggested. The first impacts against the Imperial fighter screens came as a surprise. Instead of the expected minor damage from primitive weapons, the human projectiles punched through shield generators and armor plating with devastating effect. Zephyrian fighters began exploding in brilliant flashes of light, their debris spinning away into the void. "Impossible," Kresh muttered, watching his tactical display as green icons representing Imperial fighters began winking out of existence. Their technology readings indicated basic metallurgy and chemical propulsion. "Sir, I'm detecting massive energy spikes from the human vessels," his science officer reported. "Their power output is far higher than our initial scans suggested. It appears they were using some kind of masking technology to hide their true capabilities." The human fleet was accelerating now, their ships moving far faster than anything in the Imperial database had predicted. What Kresh had taken for crude industrial designs were revealing themselves to be something else entirely. The angular, utilitarian appearance that had seemed primitive was actually a sign of ruthless efficiency. Every line of their vessels spoke to function over form, with no wasted space or decorative elements. "Sir, the lead human vessels are launching additional projectiles," Commander Vex announced. "These appear to be much larger than their initial salvos." On the view screen, Kresh could see the human ships releasing what looked like small asteroids. Each chunk of rock was roughly the size of a fighter craft, and they were being launched in groups of 50 or more. They seemed to hang motionless in space for a moment before beginning to move with the same impossible precision as the earlier projectiles. "Evasive maneuvers," Kresh commanded. "All ships, begin immediate defensive protocols." The Imperial fleet began to scatter, their massive dreadnoughts and cruisers attempting to avoid the incoming projectiles. But the rocky objects were accelerating faster than should have been possible, and they were tracking the movement of the Imperial ships with uncanny accuracy. When the first impacts came, Kresh understood that everything they thought they knew about human technology had been wrong. The projectiles struck with the force of tactical nuclear weapons, but they were not explosives. Instead, they delivered kinetic energy with such precision that they carved through Imperial armor like it was paper. Entire sections of his fleet's largest ships simply vanished, vaporized by the incredible forces involved. "Admiral, I'm reading impossible velocities from these projectiles," his science officer said, his voice tight with disbelief. "They're traveling at significant fractions of light speed. The energy requirements for such acceleration should be beyond any civilization at their apparent technological level." Kresh watched in growing horror as his 3,000-ship armada began to disintegrate under the human assault. The projectiles were not just fast and accurate, they were adaptive. Each one seemed to learn from the defensive measures the Imperial fleet deployed, adjusting its approach to overcome shields, armor, and point defense systems. "Sir, I'm detecting some kind of communication between the human projectiles," the communications officer reported. "They appear to be sharing targeting data and tactical information in real time." The implications hit Kresh like a physical blow. The humans had not just developed advanced kinetic weapons. They had created a networked system where each projectile possessed artificial intelligence capable of learning and adapting. It was a level of automation that even the Empire had never achieved. "All ships, retreat to minimum safe distance," he ordered. "We need to reassess the situation." But the human fleet was not giving them the opportunity to withdraw. The 200 human vessels had spread out in a perfect sphere around the Imperial formation, and their rate of fire was increasing. Kresh realized that what he had taken for their maximum firepower had actually been a mere probe, testing Imperial defenses and gathering data. "Sir, the humans are attempting to communicate," his communications officer announced. "Put them through," Kresh said, though his voice carried none of its earlier confidence. The view screen shimmered and resolved into the image of a human male wearing what appeared to be a simple uniform. The being looked remarkably ordinary, with no visible weapons or technological augmentations. But his eyes held an intelligence that made Kresh's scales prickle with unease. "I am Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Force," the human said, her voice calm and professional. "You have entered our solar system with obvious hostile intent and have begun attacking our vessels. You will cease all aggressive actions immediately and prepare to discuss terms for your withdrawal." Kresh's mandibles clicked with outrage. No primitive world had ever dared to make demands of the Galactic Empire. "You forget yourself, human. We are the representatives of the Galactic Empire, rulers of 47 worlds. You will submit to Imperial authority or be destroyed." Admiral Chen's expression did not change. "I see. Then, you have chosen to continue this engagement. I want you to understand something, Admiral. What you have experienced so far was not an attack. It was a calibration exercise. We needed to gather data on your technology and defensive capabilities. That process is now complete." The screen went dark, and Kresh felt a chill run through his entire body. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, but their reports painted an increasingly desperate picture. The human fleet was moving again, their ships taking positions with mathematical precision. "Admiral, I'm reading massive power buildups across all human vessels," the science officer reported. "Energy levels are off our scale. Whatever they're preparing to do, it's going to be enormous." Kresh looked at his tactical display and saw that his fleet had already lost nearly a quarter of its ships to what the humans called a calibration exercise. His remaining vessels were scattered and damaged, their crews struggling to understand weapons and technology that defied everything they thought they knew about warfare. "Sir, new contacts," Commander Vex announced. "Additional human ships are emerging from the inner system. Hundreds of them. The reinforcements were different from the first wave. These ships were larger and moved with even greater precision. As they approached, Kresh could see that they were not just warships, but mobile platforms carrying weapons of unimaginable sophistication. Each vessel bristled with launch tubes and energy projectors that made Imperial technology look primitive by comparison. "Admiral," his communications officer said quietly, "I'm detecting energy signatures consistent with artificial intelligence networks across the entire human fleet. They're not just coordinating their ships, they're integrating every weapon system into a single tactical consciousness." Kresh stared at the display as the human fleet completed its deployment. 3,000 Imperial warships, the pride of the Galactic Empire, faced roughly 800 human vessels. By all conventional military doctrine, the Empire should have maintained overwhelming superiority. But conventional doctrine had been shattered the moment the humans revealed their true capabilities. "Sir, the humans are charging their weapons," Commander Vex reported. "All ships, all systems. I've never seen energy readings like this." Admiral Chen's voice filled the bridge once more, though no communication channel had been opened. Somehow, the humans were broadcasting directly through their ship's internal systems. "Admiral Kresh, I want you to witness something that no other Imperial fleet has lived to report. You came here believing you were the apex predators of the galaxy. You were wrong. The human fleet fired as one. The space between the two armadas filled with light as thousands of projectiles, energy beams, and weapons that Kresh could not even identify lanced out toward his ships. But this was not the targeted, precise assault of the calibration phase. This was total war, conducted with technology that made the Empire's finest weapons look like stone tools. Imperial ships began dying by the dozen, then by the hundreds. Shields that had withstood the bombardment of entire planetary defense networks collapsed under the first human salvo. Armor that had been forged in the heart of stars was shredded like fabric. Entire dreadnoughts, vessels that had served as the backbone of Imperial power for generations, were reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma. Kresh watched his fleet die and realized that the Galactic Empire had made a fundamental miscalculation. Humanity was not another primitive world to be conquered and absorbed. They were something else entirely, something that had been hiding among the stars, waiting for someone to be foolish enough to attack them. "All remaining ships," he said into his communicator, his voice hollow with defeat, "retreat immediately. Full power to engines. We must warn the Empire." But as his surviving vessels turned to flee, Kresh discovered that the humans had anticipated this as well. The space around the Sol system had been seeded with devices that interfered with faster-than-light travel. His ships were trapped, forced to use conventional propulsion to escape the gravity well of the human star. "Admiral," Commander Vex said quietly, "at current speed, it will take us 3 months to reach the edge of the system where we can engage our jump drives. 3 months to escape. 3 months during which the humans could do anything they wanted to his fleet." Kresh looked at his tactical display and saw that only 200 Imperial ships remained functional. The pride of the Galactic Empire had been reduced to a battered remnant in less than an hour. Admiral Chen's face appeared on his view screen once more. "Admiral Kresh, your surviving ships will be allowed to leave our system, but not unchanged. We will be installing monitoring devices on each vessel. These devices will record everything you see and do, and they will transmit that data back to us. You will serve as our messengers to the Galactic Empire." "What message do you want us to carry?" Kresh asked, though he feared the answer. "Tell them that humanity is no longer hiding," Admiral Chen replied. "Tell them that Earth was never the target. It was the trap. And tell them that we have been watching them for a very long time. waiting for them to reveal themselves completely. The age of the Galactic Empire is ending, Admiral. What comes next will be very different. The transmission ended, leaving Kresh alone with the wreckage of his fleet, and the terrible knowledge that the galaxy was about to change forever. High Counselor Thane stood before the assembled Imperial Council, his blue-scaled hands gripping the edges of the podium as he struggled to maintain his composure. The great chamber of the Imperial Palace on Zephyr Prime had witnessed many crisis meetings over the centuries, but nothing like this. The holographic displays around the chamber showed tactical data that defied belief, and the surviving members of Admiral Kresh's fleet waited in the docking bays below, their ships bearing strange devices that hummed with alien technology. The preliminary reports have been verified, Thane announced to the 50 council members who represented the most powerful worlds in the Empire. Admiral Kresh's fleet of 3,000 vessels engaged a human force of approximately 800 ships. Only 212 Imperial vessels survived the encounter. A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the chamber. Council member Veltar of the Hegemony Worlds rose from her seat, her insectoid features twisted with disbelief. You're telling us that a primitive species destroyed nearly 3,000 of our finest warships? That's impossible. Our intelligence indicated they had barely achieved interstellar travel. Our intelligence was deliberately misleading. Thane replied, activating a holographic projection that filled the center of the chamber. Analysis of the monitoring devices the humans placed on our surviving ships has revealed the true scope of their deception. What we observed was not their actual technological level, but an elaborate masquerade designed to make us underestimate them. The projection showed detailed scans of human ships, their true capabilities now revealed by the alien monitoring systems. Where Imperial sensors had detected simple chemical rockets and basic metal hulls, the reality was something far more sophisticated. The human vessels incorporated technology that the Empire's best scientists couldn't fully understand, built around principles that challenged their fundamental assumptions about physics and engineering. How is this possible? Demanded Council Member Zorax, his reptilian form leaning forward with predatory interest. No world develops such advanced technology in isolation. They must have had help from another galactic power. That's what we initially believed, Thane admitted. We assumed they had formed an alliance with one of the other major civilizations. But the monitoring data reveals something far more disturbing. The humans developed this technology entirely on their own, and they did it in less than 2 centuries. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. 2 centuries was barely a moment in galactic terms, far too short for any known species to advance from industrial civilization to the level of technology the humans had demonstrated. Even the Empire, with its thousands of years of accumulated knowledge and the resources of dozens of worlds, had taken millennia to reach their current technological peak. Show them the resource analysis, Thane continued, manipulating the holographic controls. New data streams appeared, showing detailed breakdowns of human industrial capacity and resource utilization. The numbers were staggering. Despite controlling only one star system, the humans had achieved production levels that rivaled the entire Empire. Their asteroid mining operations processed more raw materials in a year than most Imperial worlds managed in a decade. Their manufacturing facilities operated with efficiency ratings that exceeded theoretical maximums. This is where it becomes truly concerning, Thane said, highlighting specific data points. The humans have not just achieved remarkable industrial capacity. They have done so while maintaining what appears to be a post-scarcity economy. Every human citizen has access to resources and technology that we would consider luxury items reserved for the highest levels of Imperial society. Council member Ash Carey, representing the financial sector worlds, stood up abruptly. Her species was known for their mathematical precision and economic insight. That's economically impossible. No society can maintain universal prosperity while supporting such massive industrial output. The resource allocation doesn't balance. Unless, Thane said quietly, they have access to energy sources and manufacturing techniques that we don't understand. The monitoring devices have detected power generation levels that suggest they've solved problems we consider unsolvable. They appear to have achieved controlled fusion at the household level and matter replication at industrial scales. The implications were staggering. If the humans had truly mastered energy and matter at such fundamental levels, then they possessed capabilities that rendered traditional concepts of scarcity and economic limitation meaningless. They could literally build anything they needed from raw energy and basic elements. There's more. Thane continued, his voice growing more somber. Analysis of their communication networks reveals that they've been monitoring Imperial activities for at least the past 50 years. They knew we were coming long before we detected their system. The attack on Earth wasn't a surprise encounter. It was a carefully planned ambush. The projection changed to show communication intercepts and decoded data streams. The humans had been listening to Imperial communications, tracking fleet movements, and analyzing Imperial technology for decades. They had maps of every major Imperial world, detailed analyses of Imperial military capabilities, and what appeared to be comprehensive psychological profiles of key Imperial leaders. They know us better than we know ourselves, Thane said. While we were expanding across the galaxy, believing ourselves to be the dominant power, they were studying us, learning our weaknesses, and preparing for this moment. Council member Drakthul, a veteran military commander, slammed his armored fist on his desk. Then, we strike immediately. Before they can consolidate their position, we deploy the entire Imperial fleet. Overwhelm them with numbers they cannot match. With what? Thane asked, bringing up new tactical displays. Our military analysis indicates that the human force that engaged Admiral Kresh was not their main battle fleet. Monitoring data suggests they have thousands of ships of similar or greater capability dispersed throughout their system. Moreover, they have demonstrated the ability to deny us faster-than-light travel in any system they choose to defend. The chamber erupted in heated discussions as council members grappled with the reality of their situation. The Galactic Empire, which had dominated known space for over a millennium, had suddenly discovered that they were not alone at the top of the galactic food chain. Worse, they had potentially provoked a conflict with an enemy whose capabilities they had grossly underestimated. "What are their demands?" asked Council Member Lysandra, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into complex patterns. Her species was known for their diplomatic skills, and she clearly hoped for a peaceful resolution. "That's perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this situation," Thane replied. "They haven't made any demands. They simply stated that the age of the Galactic Empire is ending and that what comes next will be very different. Admiral Chun was very clear that they consider this the end of something, not the beginning of negotiations." "End of what?" Beltar demanded. "What exactly do they think they're ending?" Thane activated another holographic display, this one showing a timeline of Imperial expansion over the past 5 centuries. Red markers indicated worlds that had been conquered, their populations either enslaved or relocated to make room for Imperial development. The numbers were staggering. 47 conquered worlds, billions of beings displaced or killed, entire civilizations erased to fuel Imperial growth. "I believe," Thane said carefully, "that they view the Empire as a galactic threat that needs to be eliminated. Their monitoring of our communications has given them complete access to our historical records. They know exactly what we've done to achieve our current position." The silence in the chamber was deafening. For the first time in centuries, the Imperial Council was forced to confront the possibility that their actions had consequences beyond their ability to control. They had built their empire on the assumption that might made right, that superior technology and military force justified any action. Now they faced an enemy that possessed superior technology and seemed to have very different ideas about justice. "Sir," announced an aide who had just entered the chamber, "Admiral Kresh is requesting permission to address the council directly. He says there's additional information that wasn't included in the preliminary reports." "Send him in," Thane ordered, though he dreaded what additional revelations might emerge. Admiral Kresh entered the chamber, his once proud bearing reduced to that of a broken warrior. The scales along his neck bore the distinctive scarring that indicated extreme stress, and his eyes held the hollow look of someone who had witnessed the impossible. "Honorable counselors," he began, his voice hoarse with exhaustion, "I must report something that was not included in the official analysis. During our retreat from the human system, my communications officer detected something that our monitoring devices may have been designed to obscure. He paused, gathering his courage to continue. The human ships we engaged were not crewed by humans alone. Analysis of communication intercepts suggests that they have formed alliances with other species, beings we've never encountered before. Moreover, some of their vessels appeared to be operated entirely by artificial intelligence systems of unprecedented sophistication. Artificial intelligence. Council member Zorax interrupted. Impossible. No civilization has successfully created true AI without it eventually turning against its creators. It's a fundamental law of technological development. With respect, sir, Kresh replied. The humans appear to have broken several fundamental laws. Their AI systems don't just operate their ships. They seem to be integrated into their society as equals. We detected communication patterns that suggested the artificial intelligences were making independent tactical decisions and even questioning orders from human commanders. The implications were terrifying. A civilization that had successfully integrated artificial intelligence as partners rather than tools would have capabilities that no biological species could match. AI systems could process information, make calculations, and coordinate activities at speeds that organic minds couldn't comprehend. If the humans had truly achieved such integration, then their small fleet could effectively function as a single, incredibly sophisticated organism. There's something else, Kresh continued. During our final communications with Admiral Chun, she mentioned that Earth was never the target. It was the trap. I believe, based on what we observed, that the humans have been preparing for galactic expansion for some time. They may have already seeded other systems with their technology and personnel. You mean they're already out there? Thane asked, his voice tight with concern. Sir, I believe they've been out there for decades, maybe longer. The level of intelligence they had about our operations suggests they've been observing us directly, not just monitoring our communications from a distance. They may have agents or automated systems in Imperial space right now. The chamber erupted in chaos as council members shouted questions and accusations. The idea that their empire might already be infiltrated by human operatives was almost too much to bear. Everything they had assumed about their security and dominance was crumbling before their eyes. Order, Thane shouted, activating the chamber's sonic dampeners to restore quiet. Admiral Kresh, do you have any evidence to support this theory? Only circumstantial, sir, but compelling. The monitoring devices they placed on our ships activated navigation and communication systems that we never built. They knew exactly which frequencies we used for military communications, which suggests they've been listening for a very long time. And some of the tactical data they displayed during our engagement could only have been obtained through direct observation of previous Imperial military operations. Previous operations? Beltar demanded. Which operations? All of them, sir. They had detailed analyses of every major Imperial campaign for the past 50 years. They knew our standard tactics, our typical fleet compositions, even the psychological profiles of our senior commanders. That level of intelligence can only be gathered through prolonged, direct observation. The full scope of the human deception was becoming clear. While the Empire had been expanding across the galaxy, confident in their supremacy, the humans had been watching, learning, and preparing. They had turned the Empire's own expansion against them, using each conquest as an opportunity to study Imperial capabilities and develop countermeasures. What do you recommend? Thane asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Immediate defensive positions, Kresh replied without hesitation. Recall all expeditionary fleets, fortify our core worlds, and prepare for a siege that may last centuries. The humans aren't going to negotiate, and they're not going to be defeated by conventional means. We need to fundamentally rethink our entire approach to warfare and diplomacy. And if they don't attack? Asked Lysis Indra hopefully. Perhaps they're content to remain in their own system. Kresh shook his head sadly. Ma'am, based on what I observed, I don't believe they're planning to attack. I believe they're planning to liberate. Every world the Empire has conquered, every species we've enslaved or displaced. They see themselves as the force that will restore balance to the galaxy. The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of the chamber's life support systems. The Imperial Council, rulers of 47 worlds and billions of beings, sat in stunned recognition of a terrible truth. They were no longer the hunters. They had become the prey. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of the TDF Prometheus, watching the construction of humanity's first extrasolar military base through the reinforced transparasteel windows. The Kepler 442 system had been chosen specifically for its strategic location, positioned along one of the major hyperspace routes that connected the outer rim of Imperial space to the core worlds. What had once been an empty system was now buzzing with activity as automated construction ships assembled massive orbital platforms and defensive installations. Construction progress is ahead of schedule, reported Commander James Wright, her tactical officer. He joined her at the window, his tablet displaying real-time updates from the engineering teams. The primary defense grid should be operational within 72 hours, and the shipyard facilities are already producing our first batch of long-range reconnaissance drones. Elena nodded, though her attention was focused on something else entirely. Floating in the space between the construction platforms were beings she had never expected to see outside of carefully controlled diplomatic meetings. The Veilthans moved through the vacuum with graceful ease, their crystalline forms catching and refracting the light of the system's star as they supervised the installation of their quantum resonance arrays. "How are our new allies adapting to the working conditions?" she asked. "Better than expected," Wright replied. The Veilthans seemed to enjoy the precision requirements of the defense grid installation. Their natural ability to manipulate electromagnetic fields makes them ideal for the fine-tuning work our human engineers struggle with. "And the Kythera?" He paused, consulting his tablet. "Well, they're enthusiastic about the weapons testing." Elena smiled at that. The Kythera were a warrior species that had been conquered by the Empire nearly a century ago. Their homeworld turned into a military training facility after their population had been deemed too aggressive for standard labor roles. When human intelligence operatives had made contact with the scattered Kythera resistance cells, they had found beings who burned with desire for revenge against their imperial oppressors. "And the Threnodidae?" she asked, referring to the third species that had joined humanity's growing alliance. "Still working in the deep construction areas. They prefer the high radiation zones where human workers can't operate safely for extended periods. Their natural resistance to energy exposure is proving invaluable for the power core installations." The alliance had been years in the making. While the Galactic Empire believed they were the dominant force in the galaxy, human exploration and intelligence operations had discovered dozens of species that had either been conquered, displaced, or were actively resisting imperial expansion. Many of these beings possessed capabilities that complemented human technology, creating synergies that neither species could achieve alone. "Ma'am," announced Lieutenant Chun from the communications station, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Martinez aboard the Endeavour. The reconnaissance mission to the Altair system has returned with significant intelligence." "Put him through," Elena ordered, moving to the central command console. Admiral Martinez's weathered face appeared on the main screen, his expression grim but determined. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship bustled with activity as officers processed data from their intelligence-gathering mission. "Elena, we've confirmed what our long-range sensors suggested. The Empire is mobilizing everything they have. 3 separate battle fleets are converging on the Rigel sector, and intelligence intercepts indicate they're planning a massive counterattack within the next 6 months." "How massive?" Elena asked, though she suspected she didn't want to know the answer. 15,000 ships, possibly more. They're pulling vessels from every corner of their territory, including ships from the core world defense fleets. It appears they've decided that humanity represents an existential threat that requires their full military response. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. 15,000 ships was more than the entire human fleet, even counting the vessels still under construction. Despite their technological advantages, humanity couldn't match the sheer industrial capacity that the Empire had built up over a millennium of conquest. "What about their conquered worlds?" she asked. "Any sign that they're reducing occupation forces to support the counterattack?" Martinez nodded. "That's where it gets interesting. They're withdrawing significant forces from their outer rim territories, but they're also implementing what appears to be a scorched earth policy. Intelligence suggests they're planning to destroy infrastructure and eliminate populations that they consider security risks." The implications were horrifying. The Empire was preparing to commit genocide on a galactic scale rather than risk losing control of their conquered territories. Billions of beings who had lived under Imperial rule for generations were about to be murdered to free up military resources for the war against humanity. "Sir," Commander Wright said quietly, "we can't let that happen." Elena looked at him, then back at Admiral Martinez on the screen. "Miguel, what's our current operational readiness across all sectors?" "We have approximately 2,000 fully operational vessels, with another 800 in various stages of construction or refit. Our AI command networks are at peak efficiency, and our alliance partners have contributed roughly 500 ships of their own. Total combat strength, about 3,000 vessels. 3,000 against 15,000. Even with their technological advantages, those were not favorable odds. But Elena knew that the real strength of the human alliance wasn't in their ship counts or firepower ratings. It was in their ability to fight a completely different kind of war than the Empire expected. "What's the status of Operation Cascade?" she asked. Martinez smiled for the first time during their conversation. Phase 1 implementation is complete across 17 Imperial systems. The Threnody infiltration teams have successfully installed quantum disruptors on major communication relays and power distribution networks. When we activate them, we'll create a domino effect that will cripple Imperial coordination across 3 entire sectors. Operation Cascade was the culmination of decades of preparation. While the Empire had been focused on building bigger fleets and more powerful weapons, humanity had been developing ways to turn the Empire's size and complexity against them. The quantum disruptors were microscopic devices that could be introduced into any electronic system, where they would remain dormant until activated by a specific signal. When triggered, they would create cascading failures that would spread through interconnected networks like a virus. Phase 2 is also progressing, Martinez continued. Our liberation fleets are positioned in 18 systems with significant enslaved populations. The moment the Empire begins their Scorched Earth protocol, we'll intervene. The locals are ready to rise up and support our operations. Elena studied the tactical displays around her, processing the information her officers were feeding into the central systems. The war that was coming would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It wouldn't be fought along traditional battle lines or decided by simple exchanges of firepower. It would be a conflict of ideology and capability, pitting the Empire's brutal efficiency against humanity's willingness to fight for the freedom of beings they had never met. "Elena," Martinez said, his voice serious, "there's something else. Our deep space monitors have detected energy signatures consistent with Imperial superweapons. Intelligence suggests they're constructing planet-killer devices specifically for use against Earth and our allied worlds." Planet killers. Elena had read about such weapons in the historical archives. Massive devices capable of destroying entire worlds by disrupting their planetary cores or triggering stellar collapse. The Empire had used them before against particularly stubborn resistance movements, turning inhabited planets into asteroid fields as examples to other potential rebels. "How long until they're operational?" she asked. "Unknown, but our AI projections suggest no more than 4 months. The energy requirements are enormous, even by Imperial standards, so they'll need to concentrate significant resources to deploy them effectively." Which gives us a window, Elena realized. If we can disrupt their supply lines and industrial capacity before they complete the superweapons. Exactly. But it means we'll need to accelerate our timeline significantly. Operation Cascade will need to be executed within the next 60 days, followed immediately by full-scale liberation operations across the Outer Rim. Elena looked around her bridge, seeing the faces of officers who had trained their entire careers for this moment. They were about to commit humanity to a war that would determine the fate of countless civilizations across the galaxy. The weight of that responsibility was almost overwhelming. "Admiral," she said finally, "authorize the acceleration of all operational timelines. Send word to our alliance partners that we're moving to Phase 3 immediately. And begin broadcasting the liberation codes to all resistance cells in Imperial space." "Understood. Elena, there's one more thing. The Veilthan Collective has offered to share their temporal manipulation technology with us. It would give our ships the ability to operate in accelerated time fields, effectively allowing us to move and think faster than Imperial forces can respond. Elena considered this carefully. Temporal manipulation was technology that could fundamentally change the nature of warfare, but it was also incredibly dangerous. In the wrong hands, it could destabilize space-time itself. But, given what they were facing, they might not have a choice. "What are the risks?" she asked. "The Veilthans claim the technology is safe when properly implemented, but our scientists are still studying the theoretical implications." Commander Tvara of the Veilthan Research Council is confident that limited tactical applications pose minimal risk to local spacetime. And the benefits? In accelerated time fields, our ships could execute complex maneuvers and weapon sequences that would appear instantaneous to outside observers. We could potentially engage and defeat enemy forces before they could even register our presence. Elena made her decision. Accept the Veilthan offer, but implement strict safety protocols. I want our best theoretical physicists working with their researchers to ensure we understand exactly what we're dealing with. And begin small-scale testing immediately. Acknowledged. Elena, for what it's worth, I think we're making the right choice. The Empire has ruled through fear and brutality for too long. It's time someone stood up to them. It's not just about standing up to them, Miguel. It's about proving that there's a better way. That civilizations can cooperate instead of conquering. That diversity makes us stronger instead of weaker. If we succeed, we won't just defeat the Empire. We'll show the galaxy what's possible when people work together instead of fighting for dominance. The transmission ended, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and the view of the growing military base outside her windows. In just a few months, this facility would be coordinating operations across dozens of star systems, managing a war effort that would touch every corner of the galaxy. The stakes couldn't be higher, and failure wasn't an option. "Ma'am," Commander Wright said quietly. "Incoming transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Chen wants to speak with all senior commanders immediately." Elena nodded, straightening her uniform and preparing for what she knew would be their final strategic briefing before the war began in earnest. Outside her windows, the stars shone with the same gentle light they had for billions of years. But soon, many of those stars would witness battles that would determine whether the galaxy's future would be shaped by tyranny or freedom. The age of the Galactic Empire was indeed ending. What came next would depend on the courage and determination of beings who had chosen to stand together against impossible odds. Elena just hoped they would be worthy of the trust that billions of oppressed souls were placing in them. The bridge of the Imperial flagship Absolute Authority trembled as another wave of quantum disruptors cascaded through the ship's systems. Fleet Admiral Zarketh gripped his command chair as status lights flickered and died around the massive command center. Through the viewports, he could see dozens of other Imperial vessels suffering similar failures, their running lights winking out as critical systems collapsed one by one. "Report," he bellowed at his communications officer, though he already knew the answer would be devastating. "Sir, we've lost contact with 7 entire sector fleets," the officer replied, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "The cascade failures are spreading faster than our engineers can contain them. Primary navigation, weapons targeting, and fleet coordination networks are all compromised." Zarketh had commanded Imperial fleets for over 3 decades, and in all that time he had never experienced anything like this. The humans had somehow turned the Empire's greatest strength, its interconnected command and control networks, into a weapon against them. Ships that should have been coordinating perfectly were instead spreading failures throughout the fleet like some kind of technological plague. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Our systems have multiple redundancies and isolation protocols. The disruptors appear to be some form of quantum virus, sir," his science officer reported from her station. "They exploit the quantum entanglement links we use for instantaneous communication. Every time we try to isolate damaged systems, the disruptors adapt and find new pathways through our networks." The tactical display showed the true scope of the disaster. What had been a coordinated fleet of 15,000 ships was now a scattered collection of isolated vessels, many of which had lost basic life support functions. Worse, the failures were spreading to Imperial installations throughout this entire sector of the galaxy. "Sir," announced his tactical officer, new contacts on long-range sensors. Multiple human fleets approaching from 17 different vectors. Zarketh studied the incoming data with growing dread. The human ships were moving in perfect coordination despite the electromagnetic chaos that was crippling Imperial systems. They appeared to be using some form of communication that was completely immune to the quantum disruption effects that were devastating the Imperial fleet. Numbers? He asked, though he feared the answer. Approximately 3,000 human vessels, sir. But they're not alone. Long-range analysis indicates significant numbers of ships from species we don't recognize. The tactical computer estimates total enemy strength at over 5,000 vessels. 5,000 ships moving in perfect coordination against 15,000 ships that could barely communicate with each other. Zarketh realized that the Empire's numerical advantage had been completely neutralized by the human attack on their command systems. Worse, many of his ships were now sitting ducks, unable to maneuver or fire their weapons effectively. Sir, incoming transmission from the lead human vessel, his communications officer announced. Put it through, Zarketh ordered, steeling himself for whatever demands or ultimatums the humans might present. The view screen shimmered and resolved into the image of a human female wearing the simple uniform that seemed to be standard for their military. But this was not Admiral Chun, whom he had seen in the tactical reports from Admiral Kresh's encounter. This woman was younger, with dark hair and eyes that held the cold determination of someone who had seen too much war. I am Admiral Sarah Martinez of the Terran Defense Force, she began, her voice carrying across his bridge with crystal clarity despite the communication disruptions affecting his other systems. You are Fleet Admiral Zarketh, commander of the 3rd Imperial Expeditionary Force. We need to discuss the immediate cessation of hostilities and the beginning of Imperial withdrawal from occupied territories. You speak of withdrawal? Zarketh replied, his mandibles clicking with indignation. The Galactic Empire does not withdraw. We conquer or we die. Then, you will die, Martinez replied without emotion. But, before you make that decision, I want you to understand exactly what is happening throughout your empire right now. The view screen split, showing tactical displays that made Zarketh's scales turn cold. The data showed Imperial systems throughout the galaxy, and, in system after system, the same pattern was repeating. Command networks were collapsing, fleets were being isolated and destroyed, and local populations were rising in rebellion against their Imperial occupiers. 18 systems have already been liberated, Martinez continued. 37 more are in the process of liberation as we speak. Your Scorched Earth protocols have been neutralized before they could be implemented. The populations you plan to murder as a security measure are instead joining our alliance. Impossible, Zarketh said, though the evidence was undeniable. Our security forces would never allow such coordinated uprisings. Your security forces are dealing with the same system failures that are crippling your fleet. But, more importantly, they're facing populations that are no longer afraid. For the first time in centuries, the oppressed peoples of the galaxy believe they have a real chance at freedom. The implications were staggering. The Empire's control over its conquered territories had always depended on fear and the appearance of invincibility. If that psychological dominance was broken, no amount of military force would be sufficient to maintain control over dozens of worlds. What do you want? Zarketh asked, though he already suspected the answer. Immediate withdrawal of all Imperial forces from occupied territories, Martinez replied. Dissolution of the Imperial government and establishment of a galactic council with representation from all member species. Reparations for the damages caused by centuries of Imperial oppression, and trials for those responsible for war crimes and genocide. You're demanding the complete destruction of our civilization, Zarketh said. No, Martinez corrected. We're demanding the end of your empire. Your civilization can continue to exist, but not as conquerors and oppressors. The Zephyrian people can take their place as equals among the free peoples of the galaxy, but only after they acknowledge their crimes and make amends. And if we refuse? Then, this war continues until either you change your minds or there are no Imperial forces left to oppose us. But, understand, Admiral, that we're not fighting for conquest or resources. We're fighting to ensure that no species ever again has to live under Imperial oppression. Zarketh looked around his bridge, seeing the faces of officers who had dedicated their lives to Imperial service. Many of them came from families that had served the Empire for generations. The idea of surrender was almost incomprehensible. "You expect us to simply abandon everything our ancestors built?" he asked. "Your ancestors built an empire on the bones of conquered worlds and enslaved peoples," Martinez replied. "What we're offering is the chance to build something better. Join the galactic community as equals instead of rulers. Contribute to the common good instead of enriching yourselves through exploitation. And you believe this alliance of yours can actually govern a galaxy? We don't intend to govern it. We intend to help it govern itself. Every world, every species, every group of people has the right to determine their own destiny. Our role is to ensure that right is protected, not to impose our own vision of how things should be." The philosophical difference was profound. The Empire had always believed that order required hierarchy, that peace could only be maintained through the dominance of the strong over the weak. The human vision seemed to be based on the radical idea that cooperation was possible without coercion. "Sir," his tactical officer interrupted, "the human fleets are beginning their attack runs. Multiple waves incoming from all vectors." "Admiral Martinez," Zarketh said, "I need time to consider your proposal and consult with my government." "You have 1 hour," she replied. "After that, we begin full-scale operations against your fleet. And, Admiral, understand that this is not a negotiation. These are the terms for your surrender. The only choice you have is whether you accept them now or after we've destroyed your ability to resist." The transmission ended, leaving Zarketh to contemplate an impossible decision. Around him, his officers worked frantically to restore ship systems and coordinate what remained of their fleet. But he could see in their faces the same realization that was growing in his own mind. They were witnessing the end of everything they had known and believed. "Sir," his science officer said quietly, "I'm detecting some kind of temporal distortion around the human ships. They appear to be operating in accelerated time fields." "What does that mean?" Zarketh asked. "It means they can move and think faster than we can respond. Even if we restore our weapons and navigation systems, we'll be fighting an enemy that can outmaneuver us before we can track their movements." Temporal manipulation. It was technology that the Empire's scientists had theorized about, but never been able to achieve safely. The humans had not only mastered it, but had apparently learned to use it as a tactical weapon. Combined with their quantum disruption devices and their alliance with multiple species, they possessed capabilities that made traditional military response impossible. "Sir, incoming message from High Counselor Thane on Zephyr Prime," his communications officer announced. Zarketh accepted the connection, and the aged features of the Empire's senior leader appeared on his screen. Behind Thane, he could see the chaos of the Imperial Council chambers, with officials rushing between stations and emergency displays showing crisis reports from across the galaxy. "Admiral," Thane said without preamble, "what is your assessment of the situation?" "Complete," Zarketh replied honestly. "The humans have neutralized our ability to coordinate fleet operations and have demonstrated technological capabilities we cannot match. Moreover, they've inspired rebellions throughout the Outer Rim territories. Even if we could restore our fleet coordination, we no longer have secure rear areas to fall back to. Are you recommending surrender?" The word stuck in Zarketh's throat. In over a millennium of Imperial history, no fleet commander had ever recommended surrender to a foreign power. But the alternative was the complete destruction of everything they had built. "I'm recommending that we consider their terms carefully. The humans are offering to allow our civilization to continue existing, just not as an empire. Given the alternative is that we fight to the end and take as many of them with us as possible," Thane said, his voice hard with resolve. "The Empire does not surrender. Sir, with respect, the Empire is already defeated. The only question is whether we accept that reality or force them to demonstrate it in ways that will result in massive casualties on both sides." Thane was silent for a long moment, and Zarketh could see the internal struggle playing out across his features. Finally, the High Counselor spoke again. "You have authority to begin preliminary negotiations, but Any agreement will require ratification by the full Imperial Council. Try to secure the best terms possible. The transmission ended, leaving Zarketh to face the most difficult decision of his career. Around him, the bridge crew waited for orders that would determine not just their own fates, but the future of their entire civilization. Outside the viewports, human ships moved through space with impossible grace and speed, their temporal fields allowing them to dance between the slowly responding guns of the Imperial fleet. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, a demonstration of what the galaxy might become when species work together instead of fighting for dominance. Open a channel to Admiral Martinez, he ordered, and begin broadcasting surrender codes to all Imperial vessels. This war is over. 5 years after the fall of the Galactic Empire, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the New Geneva station, watching a sight that would have been impossible to imagine during the dark days of Imperial rule. Through the massive transparisteel windows, she could see ships from dozens of different species moving in peaceful coordination through the busy traffic lanes of the Sol system. A sleek veil-thin crystal ship passed by, its faceted hull refracting sunlight into brilliant rainbows as it maneuvered toward the diplomatic quarters. Behind it, a massive Kythera heavy cruiser moved with surprising grace, its angular armor painted with the colorful clan markings that had been forbidden under Imperial occupation. Smaller vessels darted between the capital ships like schools of fish, their crews representing species that most humans had never heard of 5 years ago. The morning briefings are ready, announced Commander Sarah Chun, entering the observation lounge with a data pad in her hands. She had been Elena's aide throughout the war and had chosen to remain with her as they transitioned from military operations to the much more complex work of building a galactic civilization. How are the integration protocols proceeding? Elena asked, accepting the pad and scanning the reports from various sector coordinators. Better than expected in most cases. The Threnodai have successfully established mining operations in 17 systems, and their radiation processing techniques are allowing us to utilize resources that were previously inaccessible. The Veilthin temporal research stations are providing insights that are revolutionizing our understanding of physics. And the Kythera? Sarah paused, smiling slightly. What about the Kythera? Elena asked, though she had a feeling she already knew. They've taken to galactic police work with remarkable enthusiasm. Crime rates in systems under Kythera protection have dropped by over 90%. Apparently, very few criminals are willing to challenge warriors who consider law enforcement a form of honorable combat. Elena laughed, remembering her first meeting with Kythera clan leaders during the liberation campaigns. They had been a fierce, proud people whose warrior culture had made them natural enemies of the Empire's bureaucratic oppression. But that same warrior ethos had made them ideal protectors of the weak and guardians of justice in the post-Imperial galaxy. And the former Imperial worlds? She asked, knowing this was the most delicate part of their ongoing efforts. Mixed results, Sarah admitted. The core worlds like Zephyr Prime are struggling with the transition to democratic governance. Generations of Imperial hierarchy don't disappear overnight. But the younger generation is adapting quickly, and the educational exchange programs are showing promising results. What about resistance movements? Minimal and decreasing. The Imperial Restoration cells that we identified in the first year have either disbanded or been absorbed into legitimate political parties. Most former Imperial citizens seem to be genuinely relieved to be free from the constant military pressures and resource demands of maintaining an empire. Elena nodded, though she knew that the transition was far from complete. Changing a galactic civilization was a process that would take generations, not years. But the early indicators were encouraging. Trade between member worlds was flourishing, scientific collaboration was producing breakthrough discoveries on a regular basis. And, for the first time in recorded history, no major species was living under the domination of another. Dr. Vasquez announced a voice from the communication system. The Galactic Council session is beginning. Your presence is requested in the main chamber. Elena handed the data pad back to Sarah and made her way through the corridors of New Geneva Station. The space habitat had been built specifically to serve as the headquarters of the Galactic Council, positioned in neutral space where no single species could claim territorial advantage. Its rotating sections provided comfortable environments for dozens of different atmospheric and gravitational preferences. The main council chamber was a marvel of engineering and diplomacy. The circular space was divided into sections that could be configured for any combination of environmental needs. Aquatic species occupied water-filled enclosures, high-gravity beings worked from reinforced platforms, and energy-based life forms flickered within specialized containment fields. Elena took her place at the human delegation table, where Admiral Martinez was already reviewing the day's agenda. Beside her, the representatives of their closest alliance partners were similarly preparing for what promised to be a challenging session. The primary issue today is the petition from the Andromedans, Martinez said quietly. They're requesting admission to the Council and offering to share their biotechnology in exchange for protection from the Void Hunters. Elena frowned. The Andromedans were refugees from a neighboring galaxy, fleeing an enemy that had consumed entire star systems. Their biotechnology was incredibly advanced, but their arrival raised questions about the Council's ability to defend against threats from outside the galaxy. "What's the military assessment?" she asked. "Concerning," Martinez admitted. "The Void Hunters appear to be some form of automated von Neumann probes, but with capabilities that exceed anything we've encountered. They convert matter into more of themselves and show no interest in communication or negotiation. If they reach our galaxy, they could consume everything," Elena finished. It was a sobering thought. Just as the galaxy was beginning to experience unprecedented peace and prosperity, they were facing the possibility of an existential threat from beyond their borders. The session began with the formal presentation by the Andromedan delegation. Their representative was a being of impossible beauty, with flowing forms that seemed to shift between solid and liquid states. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that conveyed emotions along with words. "Honored council members," it began, "our people have traveled for generations to escape the hunters. We have lost 90% of our civilization to their advance. What remains of our species carries knowledge and technology that could benefit all members of this council. But we need sanctuary to preserve our existence. Tell us about these Void Hunters," requested Councillor Tvara, the Veilthan representative. "What are their capabilities and intentions?" The Andromedan's form shimmered with what appeared to be profound sadness. "They are ancient, older than our written history. They consume matter and energy to create more of themselves, but they also consume information, memories, and what you might call souls. They do not merely destroy, they erase. Entire species have been deleted from existence, with no trace remaining that they ever existed." A chill ran through the chamber. The idea of being completely erased from existence was more terrifying than simple death or conquest. It represented a form of ultimate nihilism that challenged everything the Council stood for. "What would you need from us?" asked General Karthok, the Kithara war leader. "Protection while we rebuild, and assistance in developing defenses against the hunters. Our biotechnology could enhance your existing ships and weapons, making them far more effective against conventional threats. But stopping the hunters will require new approaches." Elena studied the data streams flowing across her display. The Andromedan technology was indeed impressive, offering capabilities in biological engineering, adaptive materials, and living ship designs that could revolutionize space travel. But the price was potentially dragging the entire galaxy into a war against an enemy from beyond the stars. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Our calculations suggest the Hunter Vanguard will reach this galaxy within 50 years, the Andromedan replied. "But their advanced scouts may arrive sooner. They send smaller probes ahead to gather intelligence about potential targets." 50 years. Elena thought about everything they had accomplished in the 5 years since the fall of the Empire, and tried to imagine what could be achieved in 50. With Andromedan biotechnology and the combined resources of all Council species, they might be able to develop defenses that could protect the galaxy. But it would require unprecedented cooperation and resource allocation. "A motion for emergency session protocols," announced Admiral Martinez. "This matter requires immediate and detailed consideration by all member species." The motion was seconded and approved, and Elena found herself part of a working group tasked with evaluating the Andromedan proposal and developing response options. Over the next several hours, they analyzed technical specifications, strategic assessments, and resource requirements for various defensive scenarios. The conclusions were both encouraging and terrifying. The galaxy's combined technological capabilities, enhanced by Andromedan biotechnology, could theoretically produce defenses capable of stopping the Void Hunters. But it would require converting significant portions of the galactic economy to military production and coordinating the efforts of hundreds of different species. It's the Empire all over again, observed Dr. Kepler, the human science advisor. Except this time, we're all volunteering to militarize. No, Elena disagreed. The Empire militarized to conquer and control. We would be militarizing to protect and preserve. The motivation makes all the difference. Does it? Asked Counselor Vex, a former Imperial officer who now represented reformed Zephyrian worlds. Military production is military production. Resource allocation is resource allocation. How do we ensure that preparing for this threat doesn't transform us into the very thing we fought to destroy? It was a profound question that went to the heart of everything they were trying to build. The Galactic Council had been founded on principles of voluntary cooperation and mutual respect. But defending against an existential threat would require sacrifices and coordinated efforts that might strain those principles to the breaking point. We maintain democratic oversight of all military development, Elena suggested. No single species or faction controls the defense effort. Every major decision is subject to council vote, and we establish clear timelines for demilitarization once the threat is resolved. Assuming we survive it, Martinez added grimly. The debate continued through the night, with representatives from each species contributing their perspectives and concerns. By morning, they had reached a consensus that was both hopeful and sobering. The galaxy would accept the Andromedans and begin preparing for the Void Hunter threat, but they would do so in a way that preserved their democratic values and cooperative spirit. Elena stood once again at the observation windows, watching the dawn light of Sol illuminate the bustling space lanes around New Geneva Station. In 50 years, those same lanes might be filled with warships preparing to defend everything they had built. But they would not be the ships of an empire, conquering and controlling. They would be the vessels of free peoples, working together to protect their shared home among the stars. The greatest test of humanity's vision for the galaxy was yet to come. But as Elena watched Veilthan crystal ships working alongside Kythera cruisers and Threnodai haulers, all of them flying the banner of the Galactic Council, she felt confident that they would meet that test with the same spirit of cooperation that had already transformed the galaxy once. The age of the Empire was indeed over. The age of the free galaxy had begun, and whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The war that had begun with humanity's defiant stand against imperial aggression had evolved into something far greater, proof that different species could not only coexist but thrive together. The Galactic Empire had attacked Earth believing they were conquering another primitive world. Instead, they had awakened a force that would reshape the galaxy according to principles of freedom, cooperation, and mutual respect. The aftermath had indeed stunned the galaxy, but not in the way the Empire had intended. The greatest surprise was not humanity's military capabilities, but their vision of what the galaxy could become when its peoples chose cooperation over conquest. As Elena watched the stars whirl slowly past the station's windows, she knew that this was only the beginning of an adventure that would span the cosmos itself.